anything, as former President Donald J. Trump actually predicted this mess just a week after much of the country locked down. Remember this?
If it were up to the doctors, they may say, let's keep it shut down. Let's shut down the entire world. And when we shut it down, that would be wonderful. And let's keep it shut for a couple of years. You know, we can't do that. Well, it causes bigger problems than the original. That's why I talk about the cure being worse than the problem.
Deborah Burke's like, oh my God, what am I doing here? Now, I'm not saying that the former president got everything right. He did a lot wrong, but he was right there. And in hindsight, was shutting the world down the biggest mistake we made during the pandemic, aside from trusting China? All right, let's meet tonight's party panel. We've got the Spectator contributing editor and host of the Versus Media podcast, Stephen L. Miller, is back with a glorious skyline behind him. We've got Democrat strategist, radio host, and Fox News contributor Leslie Marshall, luscious Leslie, yes, and comedian and host of the Part of the Problem podcast. He is back. He's ready for action. He is Dave Smith. Welcome, one and all, Stephen L. Miller. I will start with you. This is wholly unsurprising, but it is pretty remarkable when you look at the numbers and the suffering that the lockdown caused.
Yeah, I think there's an element to this when this was all happening where a good chunk of people just accepted it and said, you know, well, we've never been through something like this before, so we're just going to be good and we're going to take it and we're going to accept all of this and the rules. And then now, as time has gone on and we found out that, again, the fallout of these has just been extraordinary. And on top of that, we have more and more information that the people who locked us down were not locking down themselves. That includes Boris Johnson in the UK. That includes Deborah Birx, who you just showed, who just kind of faded out of memory. And that just kind of compounds on top of all of this stuff. So I'm willing to cut a little bit of slack because we had never gone through something like this before, but now it's clear that this isn't working. And I think you're right that you do have a certain section of the political aisle who doesn't want to kind of let go of this stuff, despite what the data says.
Yeah, unfortunately, Leslie, I don't trust that this won't happen again because we've never gotten fully satisfying answers about where it started in the first place. So, you know, if you don't know where it came from, you certainly don't know where you're going. And I don't trust the people in charge to listen to research like this. And, you know, these are not MAGA Donald Trump advisors. These are, as I said, pretty agnostic researchers who did the cost-benefit analysis, and the benefits were minimal, the costs were way too much.
Well, President Biden in his last speech said no more lockdowns and schools should not be closed. Obviously, it's not up to the president of the United States, whether you're Democrat or Republican, to make that decision for each school district. And what I think, and I think Stephen, you know, hit on it, which is, you know, we've never been through this before. And I think, honestly, regardless of political party, I think that mayors, I think the president, the former and the current, and governors were just trying to do what is best for their citizens. They were looking at countries that had gone before us with the spread of this virus. South Korea at first appeared to have it more under control with lockdowns. We saw that also in Vietnam, and then we saw other countries like Italy, Spain, Germany, and other allies of ours in the international community do this. So I think that we were, you know, trusting of that. And also because it's brand new, another key word, which you said, Kennedy, is hindsight. Hindsight is 2020. We didn't have the
not always
the ability to have that
if
hindsight.
It were,
at the
we
time.
wouldn't have
so
gotten into the Afghanistan
the
war.
Best that they could, the medical professionals, the scientists, and the politicians.
All right, so Dave, not only will they not take this hindsight into account, they're not letting go. Like, we are still very much in the grips of the pandemic authoritarianism. You know, there may not be the formal lockdowns that there were at the very beginning, but is this a free society that we're living in?
Well, certainly not. I mean, we have been living in a totalitarian society since March of 2020, and I honestly don't think there's any other word to describe it. And when you think back about the harshest lockdowns, totalitarianism is the only accurate word. I mean, you actually had Americans watching their television set to find out from their governor what they were allowed to do today, whether they could have a funeral for their father, let's say. I mean, and I just do not buy any of these these weak arguments that it's like, well, hindsight is 2020. Well, actually, some of us were right about it before we needed hindsight, and we were out there saying that these lockdowns were going to be disastrous and would do very little, if nothing, to mitigate the virus. And now that we've been proven right, it's like, oh, hindsight is 2020. But at the time, we were labeled kooks and selfish and didn't care about grandma and only wanted to get a haircut, when really what we were standing up for were the tens of millions of people whose lives were ruined. This is going to be at least 4 generations before the damage from this is undone, if ever. And I'm sorry, this is one of the worst, just the lockdowns are one of the worst crimes perpetrated by the government against the American people in my lifetime. The people who made those decisions, I believe, should be removed from office and tried for crimes against humanity. They have no right, they had no right to appoint themselves mini dictators. And at the very least, if you're just saying they got it wrong, they should be nowhere near public policy ever again.
Yeah, and, authoritarianism knows no party. It really doesn't. When you get a little bit of power, guess what? You want a little bit more. And, to your point, the 4 generations of people who will be impacted by this, I was thinking about that. I was reloading our mask drawer today, and I thought it's so weird that this is such a normal part of my daughter's lives, your kids as well, as they go out into the world, especially it's cold here in New York City, they put on their coat and their gloves and their mask. And I was thinking to myself, like, what are they going to tell their children? Like, what are they going to tell their kids about living through the pandemic? Because it's so much a part of them right now. I don't even think they have enough perspective to think about that for at least 10 years. They're not the only ones who hate the lockdowns and the masks. Kentucky Republican Senator Rand Paul, he hates it all too. Earlier today on the Fox News Channel, he slammed policy failures and brought the hammer down on dog killer and lord of lockdowns, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Get him out. And to Stephen's point, where is Deborah Birx? But that's not all. Senator Paul, also going after some of Fauci's riskier ideas, writing in an opinion piece titled Fauci's Gain-of-Function Conspiracy, and while I'll continue to hold him and his allies accountable. So how long is Fauci going to hold on to power? Obviously, he has the secret to living forever, at least politically, Stephen.
He'll hold on to power until about January 20th at noon, 2025, is my guess. He compared this to like World War II. He said, I'm not leaving until, I guess we vanquished every last. And this is what's interesting about Dr. Fauci is he always says in interviews, in friendly interviews, I'd like to see him go on Joe Rogan, for instance. He says in interviews, we're not there yet. Well, we're going to, we still have to do some stuff and we're not there yet. And he will never tell you when there is, in his opinion. And that's because he's been wrong so many times about this kinds of stuff. And I mean, that's kind of his problem, is he's told so many noble lies and he's just lost the public trust. And he should have resigned over a year ago. I was one of the first people to put that in print, saying that. But no, he's gonna stick around as long as they keep creating vaccines for viruses that they helped engineer, and
yes.
It's this vicious cycle. And he'll be around until kind of his life's work is complete, which might result in all of us dead.
And then still, he'll be the last one alive inside the Utah
I think that's the goal.
Mountain lair. There are so many conflicts of interest here, Leslie, and it shouldn't be politicized. It is black and white. What he's done, what he's known, what he funded, what he obfuscated. And, this is someone who has not been straightforward. There are other virologists in the country. There are other epidemiologists and ones who have been working for a long, long time who aren't nearly as conflicted as Fauci. Your thoughts?
I think, and I'm going to be like Dave. Dave, I'm not going to be able to be here to see in 4 generations if you were right or wrong. Wish I could, to call you out on that if you're wrong. But you said that you guys were right about lockdown. So let's see if I'm going to be right about something. If Anthony Fauci were fired, any epidemiologist or virologist that would replace him would eventually become Fauci too. And the reason I say that is, unless somebody gets up and tells people exactly what they want to hear and exactly is right, almost like, somebody going to Vegas and, hitting the slots or getting 21 in blackjack every time, they're going to be criticized. They're going to be criticized by whatever administration they're in, whether Democrat or Republican, and the American people, because all the American people want to hear is, COVID is gone, and that's what they want to hear. And this is the how-to step-by-step on how to do it. Dr. Fauci, any medical professional or scientist, they're not gods, they're not clairvoyants, they're scientists.
No,
He thinks he is.
according to him, he is science. That's very different than being a scientist. So if you question him at all, Dave, you are questioning science. But there is a lot that he has to answer for, and there are a lot of questions that right now only one person is asking, and that's Rand Paul.
Yeah, and Rand Paul, it's almost every time they have one of these hearings, Rand Paul makes his case. The corporate media just dunks on him and tears him apart. And then about 2-3 weeks later, it comes out that he was completely right. I mean, even with the gain of function, Fauci, who testified under oath that they never funded gain of function, now says they never funded gain of function of concern, which is kind of different than what he said testifying before Congress. But I mean, I'll half agree with Leslie. I think that the type of epidemiologist that's likely to be appointed by a politician would likely be very similar to Fauci. But there are lots of epidemiologists, many of whom have been banned off Twitter and YouTube and stuff like that, who argued against the lockdowns and the mandates and the vaccine passports and all of this from the very beginning. There were a large number of epidemiologists who were pushing that we simply contain those people who are at risk and let the rest of society get on with life, which in hindsight would have been a much, much better thing to do. So I don't think it's true that any epidemiologist, but unfortunately this is the type of scientist that the political system produces. And the idea that Fauci just will not back down or admit when he's gotten things catastrophically wrong, that I think we have every right to criticize him for that, especially when he's committed crimes, namely perjury.
He absolutely has perjured himself, and you can't change the definition of something just to wiggle out of a lie. Our panel's going to stick around. We got much more. In a devastating blow to idiots everywhere, Whoopi Goldberg has been suspended from The View. And now she's reportedly threatening to quit. The president of ABC News says she wants Whoopi to use her 2-week suspension to reflect on her hurtful comments about the Holocaust. If you missed it, here's what she said. Jesus Christmas. The Nazis are like, no, it's about race. Race? Yeah. That's what it is about. Meanwhile, Whoopi's View co-hosts reportedly furious over the suspension, but staffers said to still be angry that she has a job. Does the punishment fit the crime, and how will America go on without our intellectual North Star, Karen Johnson, also known as Whoopi Goldberg? The party panel is back. Stephen L. Miller, Leslie Marshall, Dave Smith. Stephen L. Miller, I will start with you. I don't think she should be fired, but I think she's a blowhard. I think all of her View co-hosts are vultures, and they went to Page 6 to complain and, CYA, and then they went to Page 6 again going, oh my God, I can't believe you suspended her, because they say stupider things every day, which is hard to do.
Yeah, Whoopi's not the problem here. The problem are the people at ABC who put her in that position. I mean, if you're going to hire her to talk and throw out just this, this inane view of World War II history and the Holocaust, amongst other things that these people talk about on a daily basis, just making every single person who watches their show dumber just for tuning in, then you should hire them to do that job, and she should be out front and saying these things. The problem, again, and this is a problem with most of the media, is not Whoopi Goldberg. The problem is the people up at ABC News who think that this is a good idea to put her in a platform and on a show where she is paid to inform millions of people with this kind of stuff. And those are the people that really need to be held accountable, not really Whoopi Goldberg. That's just kind of how I look at it. She's kind of a relatively small fish in this whole thing. It really is the people at ABC making these decisions.
I wouldn't say small. So, Leslie, are you surprised that so many conservatives have not been calling for her cancellation? They do not want her to be fired.
Well, when you're conservative saying we don't like cancel culture, don't cancel Joe Rogan, it would be beyond blatant hypocrisy to say, but fire Whoopi Goldberg. I also think that most people know, and her agent, who is Jewish, has said, look, she's not anti-Semitic. You guys know I have most of you know I have a Jewish parent. I have relatives who died in the Holocaust. My head spun around when she said it wasn't about race. Hello, Aryan Nation, and the list goes on. I did think it was appropriate. I did think the punishment fits the crime. And if they lost money or had the threat to lose money, they have an obligation to people in their audience that they offended and to advertise
you know what? I got to stop you there because
Whoopi Goldberg did not lose her job, and she's lucky because some people would have lost their job.
They lost control of the show a long, long time ago, and no one there has had the nards to rein in these vicious hens. So, do you think she'll quit, Dave?
My guess is no, but I suppose we'll see. Like Leslie, I have a lot of family members who died in the Holocaust, and I'm Jewish. My grandfather escaped Nazi Germany in 1938. He was the only member of his family who got out alive. But I got to tell you, there's just nothing really offensive or wrong, like morally wrong, about what she said. It's incorrect. I mean, certainly it was about race to the Nazis. It was a racially genetic, obsession for the Nazis. But there's like no nuance in these things. It's not as if she said something anti-Semitic, like she hates Jewish people. She didn't downplay the Holocaust. She didn't deny the Holocaust. She just made a stupid argument, and then she apologized and said she was wrong about it. Like, what? We need to grow up. All this like cancel culture stuff is all just so stupid. And to Leslie's point, what I actually see is most of the people who oppose cancel culture being consistent on this. And the only thing that bugs us is that if this happened to someone else, all those women on The View would be fine with that.
Absolutely. They'd be like, oh, they need to be fired. They're just, they're a bunch of.
But I don't know. Are we going to, if we're going to fire everyone who makes a stupid point,
then AOC will take care of all of us.
There wouldn't be too many people left.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Now, meanwhile, over at Blowhard Central, CNN President Jeff Zucker today resigning over a relationship with his chief marketing officer, Alison Gollust. But it gets even juicier. Is that possible? Attorneys for recently fired anchor Chris Cuomo reportedly brought the affair to light in negotiations for an $18 million severance check. Although others have said the affair was an open secret for a long time. In his statement, Zucker said, quote, as part of the investigation into Chris Cuomo's tenure, I was asked about a consensual relationship with my closest colleague, someone I've worked with for more than 21 years, toured in Tokyo. I acknowledge the relationship evolved in recent years. I was required to disclose it when it began, but it began before they had invented the word disclosed. Evolved my hiney hole. Even Katie Couric, who worked under Zucker in the early 2000s, wrote in her memoir that Zucker's arrangement, before the early 2000s, she worked with him in the 90s. His arrangement with Gollust seemed super strange, you guys. So what was really going on over there, Stephen?
Today is a very bad day for CNN and a very good day for America. Jeff Zucker is a cancer in our media, in this country. This goes back to NBC and the culture that he fostered at NBC with Matt Lauer. Almost no human being on the face of the planet is more responsible for resurrecting Donald Trump's cultural relevancy than Jeff Zucker, and that obviously led to Donald Trump's presidency. I really, have to weep for those guys at CNN who were talking today that this was just a relationship between two adults. Well, no, the woman he was seeing used to be Andrew Cuomo's advisor and spokesperson. And this was about covering up and helping Chris Cuomo cover up sexual assault allegations on behalf of his brother to search out dirt on his accusers. So this, I saw someone today on Twitter just say the blast radius from the Cuomo scandal is just huge and enormous, and I don't think it's been big enough. So
yeah, it's
again, these are people who made they made other cable news hosts' private lives part of their books and part of their stories, and now they can just flip the camera around, and there's probably more news happening at CNN than they actually cover.
And to be honest, Leslie, Jeff Zucker looks like Jabba the Hutt's foreskin. Your thoughts?
I'm not going to comment. I'm not going to comment on that. Sorry, you made me laugh. I've heard for years, actually, that Jeff Zucker was leaving CNN. So every time I'd see his name trending before today, I just assumed that. So, today it happens. Yep. I didn't think it would be under these circumstances. I mean, CNN's ratings have been going down. And it's really sad for him that he's leaving, under this. But are we really surprised that, big network executives cheat on their wives with women who work for them? I mean, and don't disclose and have complete hypocrisy because you have employees that are let go for not necessarily doing the same thing. But definitely
I gotta bring Dave in here because
we're
time crunched, and Dave is very important, and the young people love him very much. So, Dave, people are really mad that she's staying. What do you make of all of this? a brooch?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It is kind of a different offense for her than for him. I think what I've been thinking about is just his legacy. Now that he's gone, and it really is completely destroying CNN, not only their credibility, and that's obviously reflected in the ratings, but to the point that CNN is despised by at least half the country, that they can't go to half the country without people just chanting, "We hate you," at their journalists. And so, in quotes, journalists, their obsession with the Russia conspiracy that turned out to be absolutely nothing, all of it, it's kind of amazing how bad a job this guy did.
Stephen, last question. We've almost run out of time. How badly does CNN want Donald Trump to run for president again?
More than anybody else in the country.
See, told you. All right, Party Panel, you guys have been amazing and wonderful. Thank you all for getting along and being smart, sharp, and beautiful. Stephen, Leslie, and Dave, thank you.